Thank you. So the first thing we say is meditation. Well, it's not, if you ask a Tibetan, that's not the first word they'd say by any means. They'd say, faith in the Buddha. They'd say controlling their body and speech. They'd say living in discipline. I mean, there's different things. So then what really is the Buddhist point? What is the Buddhist view, you know? Well, I mean, the first teaching Buddha gave is called the Four Noble Truths, the four facts about life. For the noble ones, this term, noble one, I think is a term for somebody who's accomplished that, who's realized that. So so about suffering. So then what you could say then, the very first Buddha's first presentation of his views from his own experience, because he's not a creator, he's not making it up, it's not revelation, it's not speculation, he's telling you what he's found to be true. That's a really important point. That's a huge point, in fact. We're so used to thinking of religion as revelation and something you can make up and you believe in it, which is a very bizarre idea to think like that, but that's how we think about religion, I think. Religion's philosophy, not Buddhist philosophy, that's for sure. So Buddha is this person who spent years and years and years investigating, looking for a way to see the world, you know, and then he went off and joined these, you know, there's huge, extraordinary, I mean, the Indians really are extraordinary. Their knowledge was just astonishing. We're only really noticing this, mainly as a result of Buddhists, is the Western world only really paying attention now to the unbelievable body of knowledge that's existed in India. You know? As the Dalai Lama says, these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self, which I always sarcastically say is a big shock to us because we thought it was Freud 100 years ago. You know, I mean, I'm sincere, I mean it. We think we're the clever ones, you know. Excuse me. This India is an astonishing body of knowledge about the human mind, about the nature of self, about consciousness, about reality, about happiness, about suffering. Buddha went through this incredible, what? What's wrong? Something's going wrong?
Trying to make you look bigger.
Bit bigger? Sure, I don't want to be bigger. I make a big enough impression already.
Well, people like you be.
But I mean, the gallery, you mean you want the gallery to be bigger?
No,
You mean me on the gallery?
No, the image of you.
Speaker, there you go. Look, I'm bigger, but I don't want to be bigger. Oh, that's got to be there, I see.
No.
But I don't want it. I just want to, I don't need to see me.
No, it's.
No? What are you doing?
Gallery.
Gallery, okay. All right. Okay, well, I can get closer. I can be like this. I can get closer to you. So, you know, it's like, yeah, these extraordinary Indians, you know. I'm sure many Indians these days know nothing about their past. They're the best materialist philosophical thinkers you can think of. They're the best genius IT people and scientists, you know. So the key to understanding the Buddhist approach is to understand these Indians, and that the skill that they developed, this so-called meditation skill, so-called meditation, is a psychological skill. It's brilliant. It's about the mind. And that's the biggest shock for us. Because we think spiritual in our culture, we quote the Christian, Jewish, Muslim concept of some extra component called a soul or a spirit. If you're a philosophical materialist, you just have the bones and the brain, and that's it. And if you're spiritual, you have this extra component. That's not the Buddha's view at all. He talks about the mind. He doesn't have a view like, doesn't have a word like souls, but he talks about the mind, consciousness, mind. So of course, in the materialist view, that's your brain. He doesn't say that. So you could argue that he does agree with the Christian and the Muslim, saying there's something that's not physical. They call it a soul, and it comes from a creator. But that's not the Buddha's view. Buddha talks about the mind. These Indians are the ones who began to investigate the mind. And how they investigated the mind, meaning not the brain. They're not neuroscientists. They investigated the internal, subjective, cognitive process of thoughts and feelings and emotions and unconscious and subconscious. That's their expertise. And Buddha went as far as he could go with all that, and he diverged in his own direction. So that is the Buddha's expertise, the workings of the human mind. So the genius Indians invented this technique called samadhi. That's the end result of it. It's concentration. But it's a level of concentration that it's a level of concentration at a subtler level of mind. which we in our culture do not even posit, because that level of mind doesn't depend upon a brain. And so that, of course, in our culture doesn't exist. So it's a very, very different view of what the mind is, in the big picture point of view, in Buddha's view, you know, coming from these Indians, the Hindus. So you'd say the Buddha's expertise is the human mind, not just the human, the mind. There's a term, you know, sentient being. There's a lovely term in Tibetan, sentient being, and the term is sem chen, and it actually translates as much better as mind possessor. So for the Buddha, there are trillions of mind possessors. Humans are a tiny percentage. That's where his view is very different. Mind possessors, ants and dogs and monkeys and many other types of beings that are not visible to our human eye are also mind possessors, Buddha would describe. So this mind of ours for the Buddha has this astonishing potential. So if you know, there's different paths, different traditions in Buddhism. So the one we're discussing here, Tibetan Buddhism, which is specifically the Mahayana Buddhist view, which would posit the possibility, the end result for this mind of ours, with the achievement of what they call Buddhahood. Buddha. Buddha, the Sanskrit term, the etymology is implying the complete, utter, total eradication from the mind of all neuroses, all fears, all ego, all depression, anxiety, anger, jealousy, all this stuff. This is what Buddha has found to be so. The second syllable, da, implies the development to perfection of everything else in the mind. Love, compassion, kindness, intelligence, wisdom, blah, blah, blah. These words are very, very simple. We get them immediately. We'd have easily, if we were asked about these different states of mind, we could put them into two divisions. Nice ones and horrible ones. Buddha would agree. He calls them negative and positive. He calls them virtuous and non-virtuous, which of course sounds like religion, sounds a bit moralistic, but that's the terms he uses. And this is the stuff of Buddhist psychology. This is the stuff of Buddhist psychology. And so what he's saying is, he has found from his own experience, you know, this is not from revelation, it is not from on high, it is not from a creator, there's no such concept in Buddhism. He was a regular guy who became a Buddha. He's a regular person who did this job that he presents the methodology for and says this is what he's achieved, this is how to do it. So it's got nothing to do with belief, it's to do with doing the work. Of course, taking it as your hypothesis is the starting point. Sounds pretty bizarre to think you can get rid of all anger and jealousy and depression. I mean, as far as we are concerned in our modern psychological models, including in neuroscience, we think you'd be mentally ill if you could do that. This is a nutty idea. So we've got to posit that possibility. And the only way to look into that and to understand it even theoretically is to study the Buddhist view of the mind, which is extensive. And the literature on it is extensive. And this is tracking itself way back to these dudes 3,000 years ago. So, of course, in the Buddhist view, there's all these logical presentations of why we can get rid of anger, depression, anxiety, and etc. And then, indeed, how we can and why we. So, well, first of all, why would you want to? Well, I don't know. I think it's pretty reasonable. If the last time you checked up on being anxious and depressed and jealous, I think we would know it was horrible. And then you heard that someone had a method to help you get rid of it. I think you'd be very happy. You know, sounds pretty reasonable. And if someone has a method that says you can grow your love and compassion and kindness and intelligence, I think we'd be very excited about that as well. Well, that's basically what Buddha's saying. They don't speak it in such simple terms. You know, they speak in this arcane language. And you even had a Tibetan, Tibetan is how they even talk now, because Buddhism came to Tibet in about the 7th century, in the minds of the amazing yogis from India, you know. And then Tibetans actually created their philosophical language. They invented a philosophical language, created it, especially so they could, you know, take on the Buddha's teachings into their own culture from the Sanskrit, from the Indian, whatever the languages were then. They literally invented, they got the honorific language, ordinary regular street language, and they got religious and philosophical language. So they invented it, especially for this. So it's highly refined and really fascinating. So that's how they talk. So Tibetans, when they teach, if you have a Tibetan who doesn't speak English and they teach in the traditional way, that you'd hear them speak in exactly the same way back in the 14th century, back in the 7th century. So, you know, it's important for us to hear it in our, so to put it into our language, not just throw it out and make up something new, but be able to understand it first psychologically and then, or intellectually even, then present it in terminology we understand, which is why some of these lamas who began to speak English are so incredibly kind, like Lama Yeshe, our teacher, in the 70s, 60s actually met Westerners, all the hippies, who went to Kathmandu looking for drugs and religion. Why we always assume they came together, don't ask me. Maybe because the hippies, because the Tibetans looked like hippies, men wore earrings and long hair, so we thought, oh, they're like us, you know, but actually they're very conservative people, not hippies at all. But anyway, for some reason, Westerners really thought that was just kind of ridiculous. Marijuana and meditation went together. So Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa are the teachers of this center, my teachers. I met them in the mid-70s. They met their first Western students in the late 60s, I think, in Kathmandu. So Lama Yeshe both of them started speaking English. How very kind. And Lama Yeshe, somehow, he had this extraordinary ability. I mean, I remember this when I first met him. I could not believe. When I heard from my very first teaching in mid-70s, I heard Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa teach. I didn't understand the word Lama Zopa said. I heard the English, but not the concepts. It was so arcane. I couldn't understand. I kept saying to myself, well, where's the Buddhism? I couldn't get it, you know? Because it was presenting this whole world view of Buddhism. But Lama Yeshe somehow had this ability, when he met Western hippies. He had this ability to pick up English and pick up the way we thought. It was very extraordinary, actually. He spoke in a very down-to-earth kind of way. And I sort of, whenever he'd talk, I'd sigh with relief. I think, oh, thank God, this makes sense, you know. I couldn't understand the other. It was too complicated, too arcane. So when you bring it right down to the essence, Buddhism is about the mind. That's it. And the mind is Buddha's expertise and how to radically reconfigure it, how to turn it from a neurotic, unhappy, deluded, ridiculous person into a marvelous, clear, wise, compassionate, happy person. I mean, I'm not joking when I say these words. So that surely is appealing, you know. Surely that is what we want. And this is the crucial thing. We're so used to thinking in religious terms and you believe in something. It's the commonest term we use in religion. You believe in something. Oh, I've got to believe in reincarnation, do I? Oh, I've got to believe this is this and this is that, do I? I've got to believe that my brain is at my mind. No, don't believe, not at all. Freud would not ask you to believe. I always quote this. I always say the same thing. This years ago in New Zealand, this fellow, in a teaching, he said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? It's a perfect question, because that's what we think of religion. And I said to him, well, would you ask Einstein? He was a scientist. Would you ask Einstein who revealed relativity to him? We all completely laugh. You know, it's hysterical to us to think that. Because we assume kind of science is something you use your mind to observe. Well, Buddha's the same, identical. Everything the Buddha says, assuming you don't have to believe him or like him, you can do what you like with it. But if it's valid Buddhist teachings, you better be careful, because in the West, everybody writes their views about it. Somebody goes and does a weekend course and has some kind of vision and writes a book, for God's sake. Westerners are so arrogant, you know. But if the Buddhism you're reading about is valid teachings, valid, it's not somebody's made up idea, then it's coming from a person who's accomplished it. You know, goes without saying. If you read a cookbook, you can assume the person who wrote the book, you know, didn't steal the recipe, has learned to make the cake and is now telling you their experience. That's the Buddhist approach, you know. So the mind. But what's interesting though, if you look at the Buddhists, especially the way the Tibetans package the teachings, they present the teachings in a nice orderly way. It's all coming from the Buddha. So given the Buddha's view is in the Four Noble Truths, that there is suffering, there's various levels of it, and there are causes, and there is the possibility to be rid of it, causes and suffering. And then the fourth one is the methodology, very simple. So the very first level though, given that the Buddha's telling us, okay, so the Buddha's telling us that there is a possibility to be free of suffering and to be full of happiness, speaking simply. What has anger, attachment, and jealousy and all the other rubbish got to do with suffering and happiness? Well, his analysis is that they are the cause of suffering. They're the cause of suffering. They're the cause of our own suffering right there. They're the cause of the actions we do that harm others. Therefore, due to the law of karma, which is a Buddhist observation as well, that everything we think and do and say programs us. what we do now based on the delusions, on the neuroses, causes me suffering the second, causes me to harm others, and therefore causes me to cause myself future suffering. And so we make a complete mess. So he's giving us the methodology of how to change our mind and our behavior so that we then can produce a nice, happy person now and in the future. That's what he's basically saying. That's what he's saying. So we have to do the work. It's got nothing to do with belief. Belief is like, you say you can, I always say it, you can believe in math. You can, because enough people know math, you can get away with it. But finally, what good does it do you? It's utterly useless to believe in math. As long as you've got a person next to you who knows math, you'll manage. But what if you've got, what if you're on your own? Your mummy says, go buy me 7 oranges. Well, you're lost, you can't do it. So what's the point of believing in something? It's kind of dumb. It helps on the way. I mean, intelligent belief is true. If you go to the doctor, go to some decent doctor, you've done your research, and the doctor's reasonable, and they tell you to take this complicated vitamin. I mean, who in there, not one of us has checked up on the validity of the vitamins, have we? We trust the company, we trust they put the things they say on their labels. We haven't tested scientifically that those are the vitamins. We haven't done that, So we do trust, we have faith, we have trust, but it should be a reasonable faith, based on intelligence, based on wisdom. You check out, you do your research, and you buy that brand. So having faith is okay, but on its own, whereas in the Christian view, it's the key. And that's reasonable if you posit a person who is the boss, who is the creator, who doesn't have a cause, and who runs the show, and who creates everything else, then indeed you better have faith in it. That's a very sensible way to live your life. You'll get along fine. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not in the slightest being sarcastic. Something approaching. So then the very first level, though, given that the delusions in our mind, these neuroses, attachment and fears, and it's all very specific, it's laid out very precisely. If they are the source of my pain and the source of what I do that then causes others to be harmed, which then in turn causes me future suffering, because I'm producing a pretty horrible person, because everything I think and do and say produces the person I become. That's the meaning of karma, right now and in the future. Then if the mind is the problem, then clearly we've also got body and speech. We have speech and we have bodies. They also about body, speech, and mind. The mind is the key, but body and speech are like the servants of the mind, aren't they? If you see someone smile at you and hand you a nice gift, you can deduce, unless they're schizophrenic, that there's love and kindness in the mind, and their action proves it. But if someone comes along and punches you in the nose, unless you're in karate class, you can deduce that they've got anger in their mind. It's not rocket science. So body and speech, which we totally dominate our life, our body. I mean, we even think we're our body. We don't posit anything else in our culture. So we live according to our body and the feelings the body has. And we don't even know what we think in our mind until even it comes out of our own mouth. So we're very dominated by our behavior, body and speech. So the Buddhist view is given your mind's kind of out of control, and you do out of control things, then your first level of practice, what about your mind? What about meditation? Come on, control your body and speech first. And this is boring to us. Oh, no, I want to meditate, please. But the first level of practice is harness the energy of your body and speech. So first of all, you ask, well, why should I? Again, this is a really crucial point. If I have faith in Jesus, I have faith in God, and I ask Jesus, when he says to me, God says, don't kill, don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, and so on, the 10 little don'ts. You say, why not? You should ask him, don't just blindly believe. You should ask him, why shouldn't I kill, please? And he will tell you very clearly, it's because God says. That's the Christian view. I'm not criticizing. That's your logical reason for why you shouldn't kill. And when you do kill, that's what's called a sin, because it goes against God's will. It's like your mummy says, make your bed. Why? Because I say so, she'll say. So you're naughty if you don't do her wishes. That's the Christian teaching. I'm not being rude about that, but it's what it is. But the Buddha, you ask him, why shouldn't I kill? He, okay, no, you ask Jesus, why is killing wrong? That's the question. Why is it a sin? That's why I asked this priest. What makes it a sin? That God said so. That's what defines it as a sin. It's a really powerful point. So, but the Buddha, you say to him, why is killing wrong? He said, well, guess what, Robina? Have you noticed that people don't like getting killed? It's a natural law. It's a natural law. This priest I asked, he said there's some aspect of natural law in killing being wrong, but the main component that makes it wrong is because God said, because he's the boss. I find that a very powerful point. We don't have a question. We don't ask. You know, if someone says, why shouldn't you kill? We vaguely sort of say, oh, well, you know, it just seems like the right thing to do. That's not, I'm sorry, that's a wishy-washy answer. It's a logical reason, you know. Well, the Buddha's view, no, there's two things. Okay, this is an interesting point. There's two things for the Buddha. One is, what is a negative action? What defines it? Killing is wrong because it harms others. Killing is wrong because it harms others. Then he says, don't, in the very first level of practice, like he's listed 10 don'ts, he makes suggestions. He puts his thing, don't kill, he's saying don't lie. In other words, there are 7 things. The first 7 are the body and speech. He suggests, his recommendation is, I'd suggest you don't kill, don't jump on the wrong partner, and don't take the ungiven, as the Tibetans call stealing, which is similar to Jesus. And then you don't lie, you don't badmouth people behind their backs. He suggests you don't abuse people with your speech, and you don't rabbit on about nothing. So the reasoning behind these is a really important point to get. One, all of those actions are actions that harm others. That's just what she finds them as negative. Killing, stealing, jumping on the wrong partner, raping, for example, sexual misconduct, they call it, and then abusing people with your mouth, bad mouthing behind backs, creating division, rabbiting on about nothing, boring people to tears, or lying. We can see they all harm. All those are actions that relate to others, aren't they? They're like, and anybody who's a reasonably good person, whether you're a communist or a hippie or a Catholic or a Buddhist, you'd all agree upon those things. There's a reasonable way, behave nicely, treat people nicely. It's kind of really common sense, you know. Buddha agrees. So they're natural laws, he says. It's natural. They're not wrong because he says so. It's not like that. It's a bizarre. It's like saying smoking is wrong because your doctor told you not to. It's ridiculous. You go to your doctor, why shouldn't I smoke? And she doesn't say, because I say so, and if you do, I'll give you cancer. We'd laugh at her. That's our view of religion. She'd say, I have discovered from my experience that it causes you to get cancer, Robina. It's a natural law. And if you don't want cancer, honey, child, take responsibility and stop smoking. That's the Buddha's approach. So the thing that we miss, I think, in the West, we really miss this because we hear it, another variation of religion. Oh, Buddha's saying don't kill, don't steal. And then you hear about karma, that you do negative things and you suffer in the future. Oh, well, it just sounds like, you know, someone's sending me to hell. There's a, you know, it's like, in other words, we hear it as punishment and reward. Well, there's no punishment and reward in Buddhism. It's a bizarre idea for the Buddha. We don't need creating. Because his view, which is very different, is consciousness is not physical, doesn't come out from mummy and daddy, it's not a function of the brain, it can't start from nothing, and it doesn't come from a creator. It's its own continuity. That's the Buddha's observation. This is a very, very different view. Whether you're a materialist or a Christian or a Muslim, you all agree at least that you start in your mother's womb and there's no you before that second. The Christians and the Muslims say you go back to God, and the materialists say you go back to mummy, daddy, grandma, and the monkeys, isn't it? Not for the Buddha. But his view is very different. Consciousness is not physical, and it comes from before. And the law that runs our mind, the law that runs the universe, the natural law, he didn't make it up, he didn't invent it, he's not policing it, it's a natural law. Or the law of karma. And everything, any being, anything, any sentient being, any mind possessor, anything we think and do and say is the process that produces the person we become, day by day, and then even after this life, which of course is a more cosmic concept, but mind is a continuity of mental moments that goes back before this life and continues on. So this is the point now. So in the very first stages of practice, don't worry about your mind yet. Your mind's the problem, but it's too hard to control. So you control the servants of your mind, which is your body and speech, which for most of us means speech. We don't run around killing and raping. I think many people do. But our speech is always out of control. It's our biggest problem, speech. We vomit whatever we feel. I'm allowed to say what I like, we think, thinking there's no consequence. The suffering it causes us and the suffering it causes others, it's clear, you know. So you control your body and speech. So the thing is this, so Buddha on the one hand saying a negative action, killing is wrong because it harms another, but then he would exhort us not to do it, and you'd assume that he's exhorting us not to do it because it harms another. No, not at the first level. And this is the part we miss in our culture, I think. He's exhorting us not to kill and steal and lie. Because given that everything I think and do and say leaves imprints in my mind, leaves seeds in my mind that produces the person I become, why in the name of heaven on earth would I want to become a killing, lying, you know, bad-mouthing person? It's for our sake. We can't hear this. So the very first level of practice in Buddhism is abide by the laws of karma, control your body and speech, behave nicely. And this is the thing that's hard to hear, because we think you've got to behave nicely because mummy says you'll get rewarded. So you behave nicely and someone says you're a nice girl. Oh, she's a good girl. Robina's a good girl, you know. So it's all to do with being seen to be a good person. That's demented. The reason for the Buddha, he's found from his own experience that learning, the first level of practice is to control, is harness the energy of your body and speech. Why? Because you are the beneficiary of that. Because everything you think and do and say, like the analogy he uses is seeds and fruits, everything you think and do and say, without exception, every millisecond, this is the Buddha's view of what goes on in our mind and what we do with our body and speech, is sow seeds in our mind. And seeds bring fruits. So another way to put it, everything we think and do and say produces the person we become. That's the meaning of karma. Not you kill and someone will punish you, which is absurd. So this is quite a tough one to hear, because we don't, no, you see this, I find this so fascinating. I say it lately a lot. We know very well, and I say, you know, that Buddha's telling us everything we think and do and say is the process that produces the person we become. So his expertise, of course, is about, you know, becoming a happy person, and a non-suffering happy person. His expertise isn't about becoming a musician or a cook. But we know if you learn to be a cook, everything you think and do and say in relation to the study of cooking is the very process that produces the cook. We're not surprised by that. You wouldn't say, well, I'm allowed to put as many eggs as I like in there. I'm allowed to think what I like. I can put 16 eggs in my chocolate cake if I want. Yes, you can, but you won't get a chocolate cake, you'll get a mess. But as soon as it comes to what we call morality, we get all emotional and neurotic, you know. We hear it as religion, we hear it as moralistic, we hear it as punishment, reward. So all Buddha's saying is, just like a scientist, if you want to become a musician, your mind is the main player. That's a fact. You have to squeeze your brain, and you have to learn masses of intensely complicated theory mentally. Then you can play the piano. Your mind is the main player. It's really clear. If you're a cook, your mind is the main player. We don't say it like this. We know it's true. It's called science. So you know that everything you think about cooking is super important. You can't just think what you like about cooking. You won't get the result. You can make up your own recipe, but you're still going to be rigorous. So everything you think you do and say in relation to architecture produces the architect, produces the musician, produces the cook. We get that. We have no problem. But the second we think about being a happy person or a suffering person, we don't think it. As Lama Zopa says, and it's very shocking, but it's true, the vast majority of all humans on the planet have no idea that what goes on in their minds, and I'm adding these words, in relation to happiness and suffering, plays no role at all. That's quite demented. Because we think happiness and suffering are totally coming from the outside. That's a bit like thinking that the musician is produced by the piano, Mr. Bach, and your music teacher. You just sit there, and what goes on in your mind has nothing to do with the musician. That's insanity, but that's what we think about happiness and suffering. It's quite demented. We really don't believe what goes on in our mind plays any role at all. In the normal world, we believe it's everything out there. He is the cause of my suffering. She is the cause of my happiness. It's the weather, the food, the things, the people, the event. Poor innocent me, you know. Happiness and suffering happens to me. It's very bizarre, but if you analyze life, analyze people and our suffering, this is how we are. It's quite crazy. So Buddha's hardly being revolutionary, but it's like revolutionary. We can mold our mind into any shape we like, as long as it says. But first, control your behavior. First, mold your behavior. It's sort of obvious. I mean, in my life, you know, you can say I'm an excitable, volatile person. It's not brand new. I've been like that since I'm born, apparently. And anger was one of my favorite habits, you know. Not my mother didn't have to teach me. No way. So how could it be, you know, especially children, you can see, especially a child, if, you know, I exploded into anger, shouted and yelled, whatever I did, you know. Imagine saying to me, Robina, try and control your anger. It will be literally impossible. Literally, even controlling your behavior as a child is impossible. But look how we are as adults. We can't control our mouth. I mean, most of us, even when we're nice, intelligent, kind people, and then somebody says something you don't like, you're bored, especially if it's family, we have zero control over our mouth. We don't even think it's necessary. We're like lemmings, you know, it's astonishing. So can you imagine if we could control our speech? And in one day, didn't say one bad word. Again, remember why? Because everything you think and do and say produces the person you become. So if you're thinking there, you're going to be, you know, not that anybody seeing you. You're at home, let's say, and you're reading the newspapers, you're reading your iPad or whatever you do, you know, whatever we do these days, read whatever we read, and you're mad at Mr. Trump or you're mad at Mr. Biden or you're mad at this person, shouting about that person, and you shout and yell and have anxiety attacks. No one's seeing you, no one's hearing you. What kind of person have you produced by the end of the day? I mean, it's hardly rocket science. We say, it's not my fault. Look at what Mr. Trump did. It's his fault. We don't think our anger comes from here. We think it comes from him. I mean, we're really quite demented. There's no sense of what's in our mind that is ours. And of course, our model, with respect to our Western models, with respect, our scientific models, you know, you come from mother and father. They give you the genes, the DNA, the chemicals, the brain. So it's their fault. Well, it's mum's fault. It's never dad's fault. Mums get all the blame. Not the Buddha. You know, your brain, they give you a brain, no problem. They give you a mind. They give you your anger and love and compassion and kindness. And this is a radical point in Buddhism. I know when I first heard this, I thought this was the best thing I've ever heard. The thought that I came from someone else is very bizarre for my mind. So how dare they? Who the hell does anybody dare make me? No one consulted me. How dare somebody make me, plant me on this planet, and then shit happens, you know? What a dreadful view. We believe that in the West. That's a terrible, it's the most fascist thing I've ever heard. I know it sounds hilarious, but we all believe it's the truth. Do you understand? Your mother made, and then, I mean, my mother and father, these are nutty people, kind, good mummy and daddy, nutty people, they make a maniac. And then they blame, I mean, it's like, excuse me, I know I joke about it, but it's exactly what we think. The Buddha says, no, they just gave you a body, how fortunate you are. Sure, they might have been creeps and punched you and everything. He's got logical reasons for that as well. But anyway, the point is our mind is our own. And that's what I found so powerful about hearing about karma. But as soon as we hear it, I mean, the commonest response, like a course I just did this weekend, it's common, and of course, it's natural in our world. When we hear this view, it's natural. What's this weekend? It wasn't a course this weekend. Well, it doesn't matter, whatever. It's the commonest response. We hear this. And this person, it was a really good point she made. This Saturday it was, yeah. A really good point she made. She said, well, karma's a really good view, she said, for people who've got a good life. But what you're saying, she said, is therefore the people who are terrorized and raped and murdered and poor and suffering, you mean it's their fault. That's how we hear it, you see. Can't help but hear it like fault and blame and deserve. So heavy. We put that meaning on it. It's very interesting. The Buddha is basically saying, whatever's in our mind, bad and good, negative, positive, whatever happens to us, bad or good, negative or positive. Yes, indeed, the source of it is here. It seems initially so shocking because we are so addicted to the innocent victim blame punishment model. With respect to us. I didn't ask to get born. We say it. I didn't ask to get born. It's not my fault. It's not fault. The one of blame is so heavy. Deserve. These are such heavy concepts, you know. We think like that. I know when I first heard this teaching about karma and the mind, I was so happy because I was so happy to know that I was responsible because I like being the boss. So I said, I like being the boss, but that means I can change. But if my mother really is the boss, and if my brain really is what I am, then I can't change. I'm stuck. So that's why in the 20th century, one scientist said it's the greatest finding of the 20th century. They've discovered we're not stuck with the brain we're born with. And that they discovered from talking to these Buddhists, you know, with respect to the Buddhists. I'm just chatting away here. So controlling our body and speech is an amazing practice. We've got to focus on it, though. We've got to focus on it. So when I said as a little girl, that's what I'm saying. So as a little girl, impossible for me to control. Even as I got older, I was always a troublemaker. Always, and prided myself. Oh, I always say what I feel, you know. I thought I was so clever, right? And I know that, I mean, yeah, anyway. I remember one time, I'd always have this guilt. I was naughty, you know, and I'd say things, and I'd fight with people or whatever, even when I was a Buddhist. And so Lama Yeshe, my teacher, one time I was having all this self-pity about myself. And he said, and it was so helpful, he said, there's nothing wrong with your heart, dear, it's just your behavior. And it was so helpful to hear that. So I always thought, oh, I'm a bad person, you know. I always get angry, you know, I'm a naughty person, I'm bad, I have this guilt. But nothing wrong with you, you're all right, your heart, but just uncontrolled behavior. So controlling behavior is really powerful. And then it's easy to go to the next level of practice to control your mind. Then you're going to meditate well. Do both, of course. But to think that you can control your mind, if you can't even control your speech, if you can't even stop blurting out uncontrollably whatever you think, it is obvious you can't control your mind. So don't be depressed about the fact that you can't concentrate, you know. So learning to harness the servants of your mind is a powerful first step in learning to control your mind. That's why it comes first. So sensible. So that's the big point I want to make today. Any questions? On Zoom, any questions from anyone? No? Yeah, who's that? Steve. Steve, and also the words are so tiny here. I can't see the word. I know, must be, whose computer is this? Whose computer is this? So, all right, 4 point on those names, I can't read them. Anyway, there's 3 people with questions. Good. So start with Steve. Go on, Steve. Go, honey.
Venerable, thank you for your teaching. I had a question about sometimes.
Can't hear you, darling. I don't know why. You look like you're unmuted, but well, I'm on, and I'm also unmuted. What? Wait a minute. Wait. Talk to me now. See what happens. Talk now.
You can hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So, Venerable, since I've come back from Courtin Monastery, I've noticed that there are times when my mind feels very clear and everything feels very aligned, and I really feel the Dharma is really affecting my body, speech, and mind very well.
I understand.
Other times where I feel exactly like I was before, and I'm lost in self-charity.
Okay, I do hear you, Steve. Listen to me. What's happening is this. So I don't get. It's good. What's happened is this. Steve has been coming to the teachings, and then he went off to Courtin Monastery and went to a course. And because it's such a power, it's like, okay, there's a combination of things going on. Obviously, you've got a connection with this path. You like this path, right? You agree with that? That's a major component. So suddenly, I mean, did you first come to Shantideva for the first time and hear teachings here, or have you been thinking about the teachings for years? What's your story? I forget, Steve.
So the Dalai Lama came to my university when I was younger, but really,
okay. So you've been hearing it for a while then. So clearly, you've got a connection with it, which means it's already in you from the past. So you've been coming to the teachings, and then you go to Courtin, which is a very powerful place. It kind of puts, it's like putting an atomic bomb on top of your Dharma, and it increases it. You got all excited and happy, and it helps some clarity. But now you come down to earth. You've come down to earth a bit, and discover
exactly,
you're not so advanced after. Sort of like you feel like you've got a few realizations almost. That can be very common, and that can be a bit disappointing. But it's okay, Steve. You just have to keep moving, darling, and see your mind and be happy and use this connection. You've got it. You created it, and nourish it. Study, practice, and just keep moving. It's all right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And make aspiration to do what's most beneficial. Maybe it's right for you to become a monk. I don't know. Maybe it's right for you to have a husband and 7 children. I don't know. You have to decide. But have this, if there's a strong connection there, you should, all the time, you should think and aspire, may I do what's most beneficial. I'm not sure where I'm going with all this, but you have this, His Holiness always says, always aspire to do what's most beneficial. And if you can, long-term better than short-term. So this is where karma comes out. This is where the karmic connection. I mean, I have the view of karma for sure these days. So I know when I first heard the teachings, I mean, since I was a tiny girl, I jumped in, I knew it was my path. Then at the age of 31, I heard these lamas, and it was like I'd found what I was looking for all my life. My life led to that point. And then it was clear to me I'd be a nun. So it's like, if that's we've all got different ways of the karma ripening, but whatever it is, however, your karma you created, just make this aspiration every day, Steve. May I do what's most beneficial, however this takes me. You understand? And just lead your life every day and let it unfold. You understand me?
Absolutely.
Okay, it's all right.
Aspiration.
But see your city mind like the rest of us. But don't forget your good qualities as well, because you've got to balance it a bit. Don't get too carried away with your rubbish. We tend to do that. Okay?
Thank you so much.
All right, Steve. Okay, go on. Sure, talk to me, darling. Sure, talk to me. Yeah.
So I understand what you mean about like controlling the body, like not saying the words. I assume that also applies to like, if you need to do this task, you should control your body and do the task. Sometimes though, I feel like my emotions of sadness and anxiety get stronger when I force myself to do something.
So I'm a bit confused what you're saying. Start again.
So I imagine when you said to control your body, and speech, I imagine that meant that like if you need to do something.
No, it means not. No, very specifically what I'm talking about, the very first level of practice. Okay, the Buddha's deal is that these delusions in our mind are why we suffer. Can you hear that first point? Anger, attachment, jealousy, they harm us. And then if we vomit them out of our mouth or punch someone in the nose, they also then cause us to harm others. You agree with this?
Yeah.
So the very first level of practice, for one's own sake, not to mention the sake of others, at least if you can't control the thoughts, you control the servants of your thoughts, which is your body and speech, and you don't harm others. That's all I'm talking about.
Okay.
And why you'd want to do that is because you don't want to put those you don't want to grow those tendencies in yourself. You don't want to continue to be angry and jealous and resentful and harm others all the time. So you learn to control that energy. That's what I'm talking about, very specifically. Are you communicating with me?
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about something completely different then.
No, I think you were, yeah. But are you hearing my point now?
Yes.
Okay, good job. No, you heard something quite different. So I'm sorry I didn't explain it so clearly. I'm so sorry. Yes. Roxy, darling, talk to me.
Hi, Venerable Robina. Hi. I'm currently in a situation where, I'm taking care of someone who's recovering from a surgery, and I'm just wondering how to not get burnt out while being like the main one taking care of somebody.
So it's a close family person, is it?
Yeah.
And you have to take care of them every day, all day?
Yeah.
Every day, all day. They're in your house?
Yeah.
So it's tough, hard work, yeah?
Yeah.
You love this person or they make you crazy?
Love so much.
Oh, you do love them?
Yeah.
They're not being demanding of you?
No, overall they see how much I'm doing for them and they're very grateful, so that makes it easier.
So why are you burning out then? What's one of the consequences of it?
I think I'm pushing myself too hard. I'm not sleeping enough. I'm kind of, just doing too much and having too high expectations of what I can do. But I think it's coming from myself, maybe.
But I mean, in order to answer the question properly, I have to know more details. I don't want to be personal, but I mean, are you the only caretaker?
No, there's someone else, but the other person is not super healthy, so it's
So it's really
more
falls
on
on
me.
you to do it. So is that burden going to continue forever while this person, or is this person dying, or they're going to get better?
Going to get better. It's
So
getting
then it's not
better
going to
every
last
day.
forever. It's not as if there's another 10 years of this, or you don't know. But so then
No.
I think, I mean, are you getting upset and angry about it? That's the main problem. You're feeling resentful.
A little bit toward the other person who's not as
Not
able to
doing
take
their
care as
share.
me.
No, I think that's what I'm hearing is going on. So then
Yeah.
you just have to, so then, okay, you've got to be very wise. So the other person, if you were more strict and didn't do everything, would this person then do their share if you just didn't take over so easily?
Maybe.
I think then you got to do that. If they're capable of doing something, don't just take over. I mean, is there an agreement that they would do something?
Yeah, and they are. I think that I'm also concerned that they're going to work themselves too hard.
Is there what?
It's my parents. I don't want my other parent to overwork themselves.
I see. Okay. No, I get it. I understand you.
Yeah.
So are you feeling kind of like, but I mean, so mainly it's resentful against your other parent. It's not resentful to do the work, but you're resentful about
Right.
the parent who's not doing their share. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. But that feels so icky to look
I
at.
know, I mean, it's just not going to be making much. I mean, for your own sake, forget anything else, Roxy. For your own sake, you have to be very cautious with that, because that's going to make, I don't think it's the physical work that's going to make you tired. It's the unhappiness in the mind that'll make you tired. So try not to have that, because if this other person really isn't capable of doing more, you're going to have to really just, and if it's going to be the person's going to get better, you've got to really try and watch your resentment. That's the main one. For your own sake, it's not a moralistic thing. For your own sake, because that'll drag you down. Try to have a happy mind and try not to have too many expectations. What do you think? That makes sense or not?
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like the job.
With your own mind and try and not be resentful, because that'll just drag you down. That'll make you totally miserable. So you can't force the other person to do more, can you?
No.
Are they both expecting you to be the carer, the main carer, yeah?
Yeah.
Are you happy to be the carer?
Yeah. Overall, I can repay their kindness. So
well, I think,
I am happy to do that.
I mean, I don't know what the situation is, but take the time you need and let the other person come. That'll help them. I mean, if you just take your time off, they will do the job. Would you agree with that? Would they do that? But as long as you're doing it, then they will let you do it. So maybe you just make sure you get your time off, have a clear communication about it, and don't feel guilty.
Okay.
You understand, darling?
Thank you. Yeah, that helps.
Good. Okay.
Thank you.
Who else? Somebody else here? Somebody else?
You gave an example of,
What, darling?
you gave an example of eating cake and having cake and then, oh, it's so delicious.
Yeah.
And then you want another piece because it's going to, and I had an experience where I was around people, it was beautiful, they were acknowledging me, but I went into the room and I realized I was feeling sad. And I made the recognition that I had the cake, but I want more cake, which is what you were trying to give an example.
Well, not today. We haven't been discussing cake today, have we? But from the past, yes.
No.
So then you've noticed.
The last time.
Of course, you're never satisfied.
It's the first recognition I really made.
Really?
That I was, and
yeah, I hear it.
It was so amazing.
I understand that.
Because I want to continue to make that, but I wasn't seeing it.
No, I understand. That's what she's talking about.
That
is
was
what's behind, or the one. Let's go into details now. Then the mind, the deal, the main state of mind that Buddha's telling us.
Yes.
Is the cause of our suffering. It's called attachment, which is this bottomless pit of, it's best to say, it is emotional hunger. And so we dump it on the cake, and the cake is so exciting, and the assumption is that when you get the cake, you get satisfied.
Yes.
And what you just noticed was, as my mother used to say, no, Bobsy, the more you get, the more you want.
Yes.
Which is, I used to puzzle over that. And that's exactly the point.
Well-
And when we realize that, it's very humbling. I mean, so that's, and see, even that's good discipline as well. The discipline of keeping your hands in your lap.
The recognition, you don't see.
No,
it.
to see it, it's very hard to see it. It's
Yeah,
also automatic,
it is.
also automatic.
It is.
It really is true, especially when it comes to food, because food is so basic.
Well, this is
And
about.
there's
making-
almost nobody who doesn't
Right.
have a tap for food.
Right,
And I
right.
remember even recently, I remember there's so interesting, opera, she's so amazing, that woman. But I remember now she's into that drug that makes you thin, Ozempic. That's the one. And she had this whole new show on it. She's so excited to discover it. And she was so interesting because she's always been struggling with weight and diets and all that business. And I remember she said, and I was quite shocked because I always thought she was I really admire her. And meaning I had the sense that she understood that you can change your mind. But when it comes to food, because it's so automatic, all the never stopping chatting people talk about. And she said, oh, it's our brain, it's not our fault, she said. I thought, my God, you can't blame me. I mean, it is your brain, but to blame your brain as if it's not your brain, it's like somebody put a brain in you. I mean, it's like completely copying out. Because of course the hardest habit is food. To change your mind about food, and this is one of the signs of attachment, why attachment is so hard to give up. Whatever the attachment is, I mean, there's a friend of mine on death row in Kentucky, his habit isn't food, his habit is torturing people. And as one of my friends who's a Buddhist on death row, Mitch, who's a very devoted Buddhist, amazing practitioner, and I know this guy, I met him, and Mitchell helps him. And he said, Robina, he thinks of torture all the time. So we just think about chocolate cake. I mean, are we not fortunate?
Mhm.
Can you imagine being born in this life wanting to jump on little girls since you're born or torture people, which is some karmic thing.
Mhm.
So then, of course, when there's a habit, when the thoughts are never stopping in your head and the cake is there, it's like the most junk. It's like we really are junkies. Attachment is just junky. And at least it's only for cake and not heroin. You understand? Or torturing people. So I mean, but look how hard it is. And that's the one though, you're not satisfied. You have to keep having more. And I always remember too, there's one of, remember as a little girl, because I'm attached to food, I would eat until I was stuffed. Until I felt, in other words, when you think that feeling full is the same as satisfaction, but it's not. Satisfaction is a mental state. You decide you are full, you've had enough.
Mhm.
And that demands discipline. But to notice it, like you just said, once we see that, it's very powerful.
It is.
So this is why, even from that perspective also, forget about just not blurting out your words, but keep your hand in your lap. Because the bottom line, I mean, people say if you go on a diet, the best, I mean, it's not being rude. It's not being rude. People say it doesn't work, but the best diet is you eat less. I mean, anorexics are really good dieters. I'm sorry to be sarcastic and not. So it's to say you can't eat less is not possible. I'm sorry, but we just give into our poor mind. We give into the craving. Which just shows how hard it is to give up craving. Anorexics are really good dieters. Do you see my point? And if you stopped eating, you'd get very skinny, including Oprah. I don't care about her brain. So really the simplest diet is to eat less, but it's just mightily difficult because we just can't resist the food, Are we communicating here?
Yeah.
So the best practice is control your hand. Keep your hands in your lap when it comes to the cake. This is much harder than controlling your mouth, I think. I'm not sure. Depends on your habit. But well done anyway, you did it. So congratulations.
I didn't mean literal cake.
What? Literal.
When you were giving that example, I was taking it that I want more of something.
You mean anything? Well, it's the same with cake.
No, yeah. And
Same
for me,
principle.
it was an emotional thing that I
Oh,
wanted
okay.
from someone.
Oh, okay.
And that is
Oh,
what I
okay.
was
Well, it's the
thinking.
same principle. It's
But
like,
it
thank
is
you
the
for
same
explaining it.
principle.
Thank you for explaining
But-
it.
but
For sure.
when I-
No, that's the biggest, much more deep.
Yeah,
The
but
hunger
when-
for other people's approval,
yeah.
you mean, and them
It's that-
showing you,
well,
never being satisfied with it.
Wanting, to want, to get something from them.
Yeah, there you
And
go. I hear it.
I realized that's what I'm doing. I want.
No,
more
there
cake.
you go. No, that's
You know,
I know
and-
exactly now.
You don't see it in yourself.
No, we don't. So this is the
And that
this is the deepest
recognition
one.
is so powerful.
And this is the deepest one.
Yeah, thank
This
you.
is the very deepest. The need we have.
Yes.
This is the deepest attachment of all. The belief, and it comes from the belief, like with the cake one, the belief I'm not full enough, but with the emotion one, that I'm not enough.
Yes.
So we assume it's the job of other people. That's what we think love is. We assume it's the job of the other person to make me feel satisfied.
Well, I was creating unhappiness.
That's
for
right, there you
myself.
go, that's right.
Literally
No, that's
creating
right, no, there you go. That's
And
right.
then I realized, oh, I'm doing what you were talking
There you
about.
go, there you saw it.
And
This
that
is
was
perfect.
so
Brilliant, well done,
incredible.
congratulations.
Yeah, I have to keep going.
And keep working at it, it's
Keep
the
working.
hardest one of all.
Yes.
But that's, I mean, yeah, I just was watching recently on PBS, I watch their documentaries sometimes, there's some old ones there, and there's one about the Roosevelts, the Roosevelts. And there always this discussion about Mrs. Roosevelt and Mr. Roosevelt, they never satisfied each other's emotional demands. So he always had these women on the side who gave him, because even the way they talked about it was just considered normal in the West, because his mummy completely adored him. She worshipped the ground that FDR walked on, and he adored his mother because she worshipped him. So you're always going to adore somebody who worships you, of course you will, and you run there for that adoration. But he never got that from his wife, so he had these little ladies on the side. I don't really accept them, but he had all these people who adored him. So that's this attachment. It's so infantile. And the commentator was saying how Mrs. Roosevelt never gave him that, like what his mother did, as if you take a bloody wife just because it's like your mother. I mean, this is God, so outrageous. But that's the attachment. And we assume it's the job of our partner. That's why some people don't get along, because they don't ever feel the other person is giving them enough. Very fascinating, isn't it?
Mm.
That's attachment.
Yes.
That's the depth of attachment. Neediness, emotional hunger, never feeling enough. So it manifests with food for sure, it's a growth level.
Mhm.
But emotionally, it's really clear, isn't it? It's amazing. So that we have to become our own person, become and learn to become enough. That's the job.
Yeah.
That's the job, to give it to ourselves. But it seems very esoteric. Give yourself love. What do you mean? Become satisfied. It's really hard work. It's intense. Very good point. Thank you. What else, people? Somebody else? No? Yes, sweetie pie. Yes, Eileen. Talk to me, darling.
Robina, thank you. Here's my question. It's one thing working with ourselves, right? Because we're all in
For
relation.
some reason I can't hear so well again today. Go on.
Oh,
talk
sorry.
about
Okay. We talk.
Go on.
Okay, we talk about ourselves and controlling our own speech and mind, body and mind, and so forth. But when we're dealing with other people, this is always the dilemma. So someone else's anger or someone else's volatility can be very jarring. So
right.
what's the work then? I mean,
That's right. That's what Roxy's talking about. It's not the speech of her other parent, but one of her parents isn't doing their share.
Yes.
So therefore, Roxy's got upset and she's feeling resentful and she gets
Yes.
guilty. And so it all builds up. Well, this is where we've got to do the work first on ourselves. I mean, this is why we need to practice every day.
yes.
To really learn to know our own mind, and to know our own selves and our habits, So then when we're with others, we can learn to behave nicely. We can learn to watch ourselves and not just be like lemmings and fall into the traps of other people's rubbish. That's
Yes.
why. So that's why if you're especially around family, and we have a tendency to talk, to be around family and to control our speech is a pretty intense job, because we leap into each other's junk, don't we? We just
Yes,
can't help it.
absolutely. Yes.
So habitual. And because also we're very social beings, and we also feel compelled to talk all the time. And so so often our talk is just rubbish, It's just rubbish talk. And then you have one. I mean, one of my sisters was telling me, because she doesn't drink anymore. He said she really notices now around people, even if they're not alcoholics, but just one glass of alcohol loosens your speech and then fights happen. Even just one small bit of alcohol, I'm not being moralistic. So speech is so easy to not control and therefore to make trouble and fight, So you've got to have a lot of discipline. That's why disciplining, living in vows and doing purification every day, Eileen.
Yes.
And making a decision every day. When you do your 4 opponent powers, the purification practice, the end of the day, one of your things at the end would be, and tomorrow I'm going to watch my speech like, you've got to be conscious about it. You've got to be intentional. Like you decide tomorrow for 24 hours I won't eat too much cake. You'll always eat too much cake until you decide you won't. So the same with your speech. So you know who you're going to see tomorrow, you know where you're going to be, so you make a firm decision. And the next morning you wake up, you make a firm decision. I'm going to watch my speech like a hawk today. I know I'm going to see him and her. So you've got to decide. Otherwise it won't happen naturally.
Right.
It's got to be intentional. It's intentional. It's got to be.
Yes.
Get my point?
Yes, I do.
We've got to know our danger areas.
Yes.
So to be around close friends and family and control our speech, that's a pretty advanced practice, quite frankly. And it won't just happen naturally. You can meditate till the cows come home. You've got to make a conscious decision. It's got to be intentional. Do you understand?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Mhm.
All right. One sec, one more. And they always have this nice saying: when you're with others, you watch your behavior. When you're on your own, you watch your mind. You understand? Yeah, go.
So I guess generally with family, you know, we generally speaking about family, you know, we think about the closeness and the connection.
The love of, that's right, exactly, all the good things. Yes.
These wonderful things. So why is it that that is so right for
the bad things?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, well, that's because of attachment. I mean, attachment, we've got to understand what attachment means. We've got to keep repeating it because we use the word differently in our culture. But the way the Buddhists describe it, it's one of the deepest, most primordial of our neurotic states of mind. He's not meaning having a close connection with somebody. That's called love and kindness. But this particular attachment is coming from a sense of not being enough. That's really the simplest way to put it. And he would say that's the symptom of ego. So the irony of ego is we all feel like a half a person. So we're always hungry for something out there to fulfill us. So the obvious level is food and the objects of the senses, but the more profound one is human beings or animal, people who work with their pets, especially our family. And so look at the structure of our world is people come together, get married, have sex and have babies. I mean, generally speaking, isn't it? It's just that bit more flexible now, or whatever. So it shows the deepest attachment of all is the human being. You could argue the sexual one is the strongest attachment. It seems to bring the most intense connection, right? Do you understand? So that's what attachment. So of course, there's attachment. When you're close to somebody, strong karmic connection, you're very close to that person, you live in the same house as that person, and it's your partner, and you have all these expectations which have been built up culturally as well of how the other person should behave and how it's their job to make you happy. I mean, what an intense relationship. It's asking for trouble. It's fortunate. Some people, you can see some people have such good relationships, they don't fight that much, you know. You can really see some people I admire, but it's bloody well rare, excuse me, it's really rare, surely, because if the person is the one that's going to be most intensely thinking about day and night, I mean, parents and children, mummies think about their babies all the time. Look at the troubles that could be if it became possessive and manipulative. It would be a disaster, just because of attachment. You don't fight with strangers. By definition, you don't fight with a stranger. It's only close people. And that's why I always quote, what is it like 40% of all women on the planet who get murdered, it's the bloke in the same bed that murders them. It's not against men. That's an attachment. And it shows that one is the intense of most of us, ordinary people who never look at our minds, this emotional hunger, a sense I'm nobody, and now I've got to get a husband because I'm nobody otherwise. You get a husband, and then, you know, he gets abusive because you're all, you know, and you've all got this neediness. You're each trying to expect something from the other. There's no self-awareness. There's no consciousness. There's no controlled behavior. I'm not surprised that more than 40% of women are not murdered. I'm not joking. I'm not being sarcastic. It's a minefield. It's not being mean and sarcastic. Relationships can be the most intense, best in the world. Of course they can. It takes hard work. I can't imagine it. Well done if you do it. I'd rather be on my own midday. Thank you very much. Do you understand? And even as a girl at school, I remember that they talk about getting married, you know. What are you going to do when you grow up? You're going to get married. Well, I wouldn't say anything, but I think, what would you want to live in the same house in the same bed with that person for? I know it sounds weird saying this. I sound a bit autistic or something. It was never my thing, I promise. I tried to get happy. I had boyfriends and girlfriends. I tried to get happy. It was never what I wanted. I mean, I'm just talking. I'm just sort of joking, you know, but not really. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Any questions? What time is it? 8:45. No, it's not 8:45, is it? It is. Oh, we're over time, aren't we? No, we're not. Okay, go on. People talk. Any questions? Any question? Any question?
I got one.
Go on then.
So the other day, I lost my temper.
Oh, you did, naughty
did.
boy.
Yeah.
Who'd you
and,
shout at? Your mother, your sister, your girlfriend, your
No,
boyfriend?
it was
A policeman?
an employee who was misbehaving.
Oh, okay, you're the
and,
boss.
Yeah.
You're the boss.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Okay, so that's great, that's a relationship.
Yeah,
And they were misbehaving, meaning not doing their job or cheating or what?
not doing their job.
Okay, so you got mad at them.
Yes,
You lost control.
yes.
Which probably doesn't, it's not effective, is it?
I mean, it got a resolution that I was happy with.
Oh, you did get, okay.
And
Oh, okay.
sometimes I would feel bad in this situation.
But
after-
just let me ask you really carefully though, did you really lose your temper? You really lost control, or you did it consciously for their benefit? I'm not trying to make you a saint, but what do you think?
I was conscious through some of it, and then I lost my temper.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, that's good, did you see it?
I'm better now than before I started
You really
practicing. I
no,
can
no.
stay, like, I can maintain
There you go.
awareness through a lot of it,
Okay,
but I still have moments
Okay.
where, the temper takes over.
okay, so, and then how do you have a practice where do you do the purification practice every day, you know that one?
I do not, no.
Well, that's helpful to do. It's very practical psychology.
Mhm.
I mean, Lama Zopa says we're insane not to do it every day. It's very, bring it right down to earth. There's 4 steps in it. You sit at the end, you do a practice at the end of the day. It's
Yeah.
helpful too. So this is a really practical. I mean, it's in the Tibetan tradition we have it's a more, you know, it's kind of more related to different prayers and things. But it's really 4 essential steps, and you can make it your own. You sit down, you do a few minutes just calming your mind, steady your mind before you go to sleep. There's the 4 R's.
Mhm.
The first one is you acknowledge. Okay, it's a perfect example. When we get guilty, you think it over in your head, don't you? You get all stirred up about it. So you think regret, and regret's a really good quality. It's not guilt, it's regret. So you say to yourself, what's your name?
Jess.
Jess, that's right. So you say to yourself, okay, I regret losing my temper. And you've got it, and it's important to put it this way very clearly. Because, not because of guilt, but because of the harm it does to you.
Mhm.
You've got to know, you've got to, and this is something I think we miss because we think well, that sounds selfish. No, you know yourself the harm that comes to you. You know it distresses you. You don't want that habit. Don't you agree? So you've got to, it's sort of like compassion for yourself. Not sentimental, but regret. I do regret doing that because I don't want the suffering. I don't want to continue to get angry. I don't want this habit. And that's true, isn't it? You've got to isolate it to that, not guilt. Like, oh, I shouldn't have got angry, I'm a bad person. You've got to really say it out of kindness to yourself. I do regret doing that because I don't want to continue that habit. Would you agree with that thought?
Yeah.
That's your first one. That's your first one, regret. Then you think, well, what can I do about it? The next step. Okay, you do this about other things as well. You know, kicked the dog and killed somebody last year, and you regret a few things in this life, maybe. I mean, I always regret my abortion when I was 23. Different actions you've done, and because of the karmic one, that you leave a seed or a tendency in your mind. You want to shift it. You want to change it. Don't say it.
Mhm.
So you regret the different things you've done because you've got to say it, because I don't want the future suffering. That's a crucial point. Then you think, well, what can I do about it? You go to the second step. So there, of course, then you think, well, who can I turn to? We use the analogy of Buddha as a doctor. So we do a practice, you visualize Buddha above your head, and you rely upon the Buddha. So that part might be meaningful to you or not, because you're using Buddhist practices, right? Well, you can think of the Buddha there above your head as you wish, and you're happy you've got a doctor. I think that's our relationship with the Buddha, not a creator. He's like a doctor, he's like a mentor. So I'm glad I've got a method. And then the second part is also you have compassion for the person you harmed, if you hurt this person. You think sincerely, and I regret also for their sake, and I must fix myself. First one is regret for your own sake, and the second one, you take refuge, you think of the Buddha, and the second part of that second step is you now have compassion for the person you harmed, any harm you did, and anybody else you've harmed in your life. You think of it this life, any actions you've done, you have compassion now. I must fix myself out of compassion for them. Third step is you do a little practice, visualizing, you'd say the mantra, we do different kinds of things. I don't know what kind of practice you do, but you can do a little practice, you can visualize light coming, just imagining, use your mind, just using your mind, purifying. And then the fourth step is a decision to change. It's very simple, 4 steps, and it's reasonable.
Yeah.
You know? So the regret one is important, kind of, and it's not guilt.
Yeah, I only have the regret for my sake, though. I have not yet having.
Oh, you haven't got compassion for the person you harmed.
Yeah.
Did you harm him much? Did you think you harmed him? Right, with your anger? Did you harm it? Did you harm him or not?
I would say so, yeah.
So you haven't got compassion for him.
No.
So you're mad at him still. That means you're still mad at him.
Yeah.
Okay, well, look at that. Just look at it, own it, see it. And that's the point about for yourself. This is the part that's really tough.
Mm-hmm.
So there it is. In other words, you've got it's called anger, right? You're angry.
Right.
And this is where it's a bit difficult because he didn't do his job properly. So it is correct to want him to do his job properly. But anger's also on top of that, isn't it? So that's the thing, and that's what's hard about the very first step. Forget compassion. But can you see how it's distressing you or not? See, that's the point. That's what compassion for ourselves is to see how the anger and the anxiety and the depression and the jealousy harm ourselves. Don't be guilty, don't beat yourself, but notice it. And that's why, and that's the most basic meaning of karma. Forget future lives. But what we think and do and say is what produces us. And that's ownership. So not out of guilt, but just observe how it harms you. You get my point?
Yeah, no, I do.
That's
Sometimes
really
I fall
key.
into this trap of thinking that anger makes me more effective in certain situations.
I understand.
But
I understand.
Then it's what it, the habit does.
So
later on,
the point is this though.
yeah.
What we tend to think of is you speak strongly to somebody, like your employee, we assume that means anger. So then we think if you give up anger, you become soft. No, that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Being firm and critical and demanding he do his job, that's not anger, that's kindness. But you've got to distinguish the two. Do you understand? So we tend to think patient means weak and anger means strong. But anger is on top of criticism. So saying he did a bad job is a fact, not criticism. That's a fact. But anger is on top of it. It gives an extra flavor to it. So it doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. So a person who's wise, I mean, the person who's wise and has learned to work with anger, you'd still be very firm and clear. You'd even fire the bloke if you had to. But it doesn't mean it has to be anger. And that's the part that's hard to see the difference. So you have to work on it. Because anger, I mean, I can see this myself, my nature's like that. So what I see is you give up, anger is related to wanting to harm the person, at whatever level, you're mad at that person. So giving that up doesn't mean you give up giving up seeing what's right and making things happen. You have to see the difference. Do you understand?
Yeah.
You don't have to throw the baby out the bathwater. Not like that. It takes time. So I know for me, myself, I can see that anger, energy, is criticism. Anger is criticism, isn't it? He did this and he did that. They might be facts. But being angry about it is extra on top. It doesn't mean that still the fact is not there. So there's a war in Ukraine, but being angry about it is extra. Right. Stop being angry doesn't mean you accept the war in Ukraine. It's still a war in Ukraine. Now, and then you say, now, I remember Martin Luther King always said this. It was very helpful. He said it's good to be angry. He meant it's good to find fault. Look at the suffering, look at the injustice, look at the poverty. But then you say, what can I do to fix it? So if you have got that, is it your business? Okay. No, okay, but you are still the boss. So you still want to fix it, and you want to fix it for everybody's sake also, not just to do your wishes, you know? So you've got to have a bigger wish for the thing to go well. And that's reasonable to tell him off, but that doesn't have to be anger. That's all. Anger is uncontrolled because your attachment isn't getting what it wants.
Right.
Get my point?
Yeah.
It's hard to see the difference. That's the job. That's the job. Okay?
Thank you.
Keep moving, Jeff. What else, people? Time to go home soon. Time to go home. Okay? I've said enough. Anything else?
Robina, I have one last question since we're on that subject. What do you do with that reservoir of anger, even if you know that it's not beneficial?
Oh, darling, it's so hard. It means you've got to do the work internally. And that's why also it's really helpful to have a friend to talk to. If we haven't got a therapist, have a best friend. But it's got to be a friend who doesn't get dragged down by your dramas. And so this is where I think also to recognize if you're trying to work on your mind, you're trying to become a better person, which is marvelous, then you're going to be seeing your mind even more, and you're going to see your anger even more. If it's a habit, you're going to see it. It's there. The habits are very deep. So don't be scared of it. But there's a difference between, like say Jesse's my boyfriend, and he's just been mean to me, and I come to you crying. So there's two scenarios. One is, he's a creep, and I hate this man, and you're saying, yeah, I know, isn't he a creep, Robina? How can you live with him? That's being angry. But if I come to you as my friend and I want to talk to you to help me deal with my anger, and I'm crying and shouting, but it's to help me work with it, that's not being angry. Do you understand what I'm saying?
What can you give an example of help someone work with it? Like you just said, as a.
Well, I mean, anger is a bunch of thoughts. He this and she that, and how dare he this and she this. It's a big conceptual conversation in your head. You've got to argue with it all, or you've got to work it through. So like if Jess is not doing, so then okay, your point. Let's say I'm with Jess as my boyfriend, which means I have massive attachment and expectations of him, and he's not meeting my expectations. So the major one there is, forget about what I think he should have done. How about meeting my expectations? My attachment's not being fulfilled. So that's my problem. Even if he's not doing it, even if he should be doing it, still that's the one about, it's very difficult to see. So it's really, anger is the response when my attachment doesn't get what it wants. So there's still a fact. Now go back to your scenario, that he didn't do his job. That's a fact. But your attachment, your need for things to go the way you want, which is self-centeredness, then causes you to be angry and pissed off because your attachment's not getting what it wants. That's your very private scenario. This has almost got nothing to do with the fact that he didn't do his job.
Right.
And it's junk on top. So if you're trying to help me work with my anger, it's because of my own expectations. So I've got to work with that and work through it and learn to accept. Because I'm decided to live with the bloke. Do you understand my point? So that's not being angry, that's working with it. But it's all conceptual stories, and it's got to dig deep. It's very hard to hear it. Do you understand? All anger, all these emotions, which we think of as emotions, they're all just the tip of the iceberg of these conceptual stories deep in the bones of our being, very old habits. That's why it's hard to see them.
You mentioned the 4 R's.
Yes.
What is the third R in
the remedy?
Oh, the remedy.
So there's the result, the regret, which is like, I did this and I did this, like accountability, and I did this, and you know what, Robina, I regret it because I'm sick of this suffering.
Yeah.
It's like not guilt. Then who can I turn to? We use the Buddha's idea. We have this practice. We visualize the Buddha. So it's called reliance. And the second part, we want to now have compassion for others, for the ones we've harmed. Jess will do it one day. Don't worry about Jess. Have compassion for yourself first. The third one is you do the little visualization. You can do it. We do a whole practice. You can visualize nectar coming, purifying it, and that's your mind. So it's good. The fourth one is, resolve. Tomorrow I'm going to watch my body. Do it. Maybe give yourself 24 hours, or 5 hours, or a day, or something else. Regret, reliance, the remedy, and resolve. It's a simple way of saying it. There's a whole formal way the practice is done, and it's a practice we do at the end of every day. It's very helpful. It's like you're being your own friend when you do it. You're talking to yourself.
Yes.
I think it doesn't. It's very helpful. Okay, people, time to go home. Thank you, everybody. All right. Thank you. And just we'll do a little prayer. May compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. Jamchog, Semchog, Rinpoche, Ma Kye Panam, Kye Gyuchig, Kye Panyam Pa Me Panyam, Gom Ne, Gom Du, Kabasho. That's all. Done. Finished. Thank you.